Hi, I'm Mackenzie.
Hey, I'm Denise, and welcome to the podcast from Rundown to Renewed.
We are continuing in our series of the fruit of the Spirit with fruitful women of the Bible. And this comes from Galatians 5:22 to 23, which reads, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self control. Against such things there is no law."
Yes. So today we're going to talk about faithfulness.
Mm.
And this is one of my favorite chapters. So I'm excited about this one. We often can think about like the concept of faithfulness in relationship to like how we can best demonstrate like our faith in God, right?
Mm.
But you know, being a perfect Christian is downright impossible, but God's faithfulness is perfect. It is whole, it is complete.
Mhm.
And so he loves us without fail
Yeah.
and forever calls us his children. And like if you think about that old hymn, Great is Thy Faithfulness,
Mm.
he sang that growing up in church. And once you hear it and then it's gonna be in your head for a while because it just
Mhm.
started ringing in mine.
Yep.
So
I keep saying,
yeah,
"Great is thy
so good.
faithfulness."
I love it. I
Yeah.
love, love, love it. So yeah, remember that as we kind of go through today about it's about his faithfulness.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think a sign of just spiritual maturity overall is letting our belief in God take precedence over whatever factors may be
Hmm.
present in any given circumstance that we're in.
Right.
We may not always know the outcome, but we know the one who is with us every step of the way and can
Mhm.
trust that the outcome that he's going to have for us is greater than the one that we can even imagine.
Yeah, and that's where like peace comes in,
Mm,
right? And we talked
yeah.
about that a few weeks ago. And so, faith begins in our heart with like that internal decision to believe in God.
Yeah.
And that is what is going to compel us to act in a way that like defends and protects our faith,
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so today we're going to talk. Our first character is Ruth, and she's got a whole
Yep.
book of the Bible. Go read it. Um, One of my absolute favorite sermon series is on Ruth.
Mhm.
Like I've re-listened to it a few times now because it hits differently in different seasons.
Yeah.
And so, we kind of touched on Ruth when we talked about Naomi a couple of weeks ago. So we'll give you a really brief synopsis. If you missed that episode, go back and listen. Um, so Naomi and her husband and her two sons leave Bethlehem and they go to Moab to escape famine. Her two sons marry. They marry Moabite women, and her husband dies. And then years later, her sons die. It's just tragedy upon tragedy,
Yeah.
and for Naomi.
So the famine is over. Naomi is like, I have nothing left here. I'm going to go back to Bethlehem,
Mhm.
and actually encourages her daughter-in-laws to go back to their families and not go with her.
Right, right. But Ruth, one of the daughter-in-laws, she refuses.
Mhm.
She refuses to leave and she chooses to go back with Naomi. And so she essentially abandons everything that she knows, everything that she worships, her whole way of living, right? By
Yeah.
returning with Naomi.
Hmm.
And she even goes far enough to adopt um adopt, the God that Naomi worships, which is
The
Yahweh,
God.
the God. Yes. And so she worships God as her own God too. She transforms in that way.
Yeah, so they're going back with pretty much nothing.
Hmm.
They have no men, and you kind of need men to survive in
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 that
that in
culture.
that culture.
Yeah.
And so what they do to survive is Naomi's like super depressed. And so Ruth is like, I got this. I'm going to go work and collect grains. And so she would go to this grain field and just collect whatever was dropped out of other people's baskets
Hmm.
and take that. And in this field that she worked, it was Boaz's field.
Hmm. Yeah. It was run by Boaz. And so um she she trusts, I mean, if you've read the book of Ruth, you know how this goes, right? And so like she trusts her mother-in-law as her mother-in-law kind of guides her in these customs
Mm.
to eventually gain Boaz as a husband, right? And so she's like gleaning all of like she's in the grain fields, right? Like she's gleaning what she has left. Like they have nothing,
Yeah.
right? And so she's gleaning any opportunity
Mm.
that she can. Like she's not looking at the lack. She's looking at what can I gain?
Right.
She's and it would be very easy for her to go into a depression too. She lost a husband too.
Right.
It's not like it's not like Naomi's the only one that lost.
Yeah.
Um, Ruth lost too.
Hmm.
And so, but she doesn't choose to lean into that.
Yeah.
She chooses to lean into her faith. They had a lot going against them,
Hmm.
and she chooses faith in God, and he provides.
Yeah.
In his faithfulness to them, he provides what they need.
Yeah. And like Denise said earlier, due to her loyalty to Naomi, like she chose to leave
Mhm.
everything,
Mhm.
right? And she did it with love and honor. She abandoned her former people's ways in favor of living with God's people because, she was a Moabite woman and they were wicked in a lot of ways.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so she recognized all of this. And coming to Bethlehem, she could have easily been shunned because she was Moabite. And God just protects her through her faithfulness of leaving those things and and loving him.
Yeah. Yeah. And so due to this, like God recognizes this and he rewards her loyalty
Mm.
with the gift of being a direct ancestor of Christ, right? Which is like incredible.
Yeah.
And in the sermon series that I've listened to a few times, like one of the things that he said that just always made me giggle, but it's so true, right? Like when Ruth's going about her life, she's not like they're going to write a book in the Bible about me. Like
Yeah.
they're going to like she's just gleaning. Like she's
Yeah.
literally just taking anything that she can to rebuild her life,
Mm.
And so in doing such a thing, her her faithfulness grants her this opportunity to be a direct ancestor of Christ. And so that speaks to like our faithfulness, right? Like
Right.
the things that we are doing now
Mm.
can have impact, will have impact
Absolutely.
for better or for worse,
Yep.
will have impact for the generations to come. Like
Mhm.
how you choose to live your life, it matters.
Mm.
It will pour into it doesn't just pour into now what we can see,
Yeah.
and that holds weight too. That matters too. But there's there are generations in your family lineage that aren't here yet, but that what you're doing today will have a direct impact on them.
That's so powerful
It's
too.
like it's very humbling.
Yeah.
It's very humbling.
Yeah. With my life and like if I asked myself the question of how have I seen God's faithfulness, I could tell you a million things.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that stands out to me is just my marriage. Um, I had a baby before marriage and my husband was just amazing through it all. We've now been married 13 years, but we didn't have the foundation of God in our relationship at the beginning. And so we decided to change that and we put him in the center of everything, which just drew us closer together. And so it's been cool to see how God used those low moments and those those moments where we didn't have much faith and he grew it in those moments now to the point of we are able to help friends in like couple friends that need help with their marriage. We're able to offer advice and everything because we've been through all of it.
Yeah.
We've hit the rock bottom and we've built from there. So I think that is really amazing to see how God has built both of us individually and together when our foundation wasn't was not solid.
Mm-mm. But like you made a choice.
Right.
You both did,
Yeah.
and that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's never too late to make that choice either,
Yeah.
you know? So if you're waiting for something, don't wait.
Yeah.
Choose right now
Yes,
to do
absolutely.
whatever God is calling you to.
Yeah. Yeah. And like when I think about God's faithfulness in my life, something that a big thing has been just through my kids,
Mm.
and I've shared, I mean, we've been through a lot the last few years, and they, something that we do when I have them every day is we actually do affirmations. And one of the affirmations that has been important for me to impress upon them is that they have a voice and they will use it. Their voice matters. And it's interesting because they'll come home from school and they'll tell me a story about these probably, like, in the grand scheme of things, they seem really small, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, this person asked me to do this and I didn't want to, so I kindly told them no. You know, we're I teach them how to use their voice in a way that is not abrasive,
Yes. Yes.
but direct, right?
Mhm.
Because that matters.
Mhm.
That really, really matters in communication. And so, you know, they'll just tell me a story about, something like that. I didn't want to do it. So I told them, and I'll reiterate to them, "Hey, that's great. You used your voice. Good job." And sometimes I wonder, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like Denise, are you like just drilling this too hard?" But I but then other times they'll recognize that they use their voice, right?
Mhm.
Like they'll tell me a story and they'll be like, "Oh," like it clicks for them. Like, "Oh my gosh, like I used my voice."
Yeah.
And so I think coming from me, I operated a lot out more so out of like fear of what are people going to think and what's this going to do, and I wasn't really comfortable kind of rocking the boat on things. And so I was quiet a lot, and I just don't want that for them.
Yeah.
Teaching them to use their voice because it matters, because
Right.
God created them with a beautiful mind and a beautiful heart, and like those things matter because
Mhm.
they matter.
Yep.
And so just seeing them grow through that, even at their young ages, has been really powerful. And I can't wait to see how that progresses for them, as they get older, especially them teenage years.
You might eat all of your words in a
I
few years,
might.
but
I might, because they will use their voice with me too. It's been done. I won't shy away from that reality. But I'm proud of them too.
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
and there are times where it's not appropriate, and I'll just tell them like, "Listen, like I'm still your mom."
Right.
And like I do get the final say on certain things, and
Mhm.
this is one of them for
Yeah.
your protection.
Yeah.
That's where I draw the line on stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, and just seeing how like that compound, like when you do these like in your marriage too, right? Like these seemingly small things that you just choose to do because you're being faithful and you're choosing to seek God in that faithfulness, and his faithfulness will meet your faithfulness.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's work.
Yeah, and it all comes back to like that choice that you said. You
Yeah.
chose this is important. I want my girls to know this because it's biblical.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to experience what I've experienced. And so for you to make that choice and then put the effort into it,
Hmm.
it's not just like, oh, this is the way it is and this is how
Yeah.
we have to accept life.
Yeah.
No, you do not have to do
Mm-mm.
that.
And I think it's very easy to fall into, like, you just modeled a victim mentality so well.
Yeah.
Woe is me.
Mhm.
This happened, and now I have to accept it. And and it's like, yes, there are certain realities in life that you do have to accept, but you don't have to stay victim to those things.
Right.
And I want my girls to walk in victory,
Mm,
not victimization.
yeah.
And they can have that every single day of their life.
Yep.
And so can I, and so can Mackenzie, and so can everyone listening
Yep.
and beyond.
Amen.
Um, but you do have to choose.
Mhm.
Like that's part of faithfulness
Yep.
on our end of things, is choosing
Yeah.
to continue those compound efforts.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily see it all right away, but look at the fruit from their marriage,
Yeah.
and look at what I believe will be the fruit for my kids.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It matters.
It matters. So the next story that we're going to talk about comes from Acts 16, and we're going to talk about the woman Lydia. And this is a really cool story also. I feel like they're all super
They're all.
cool.
It's really. It's
Like
been
if
a really empowering.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you need entertainment, like go to the Bible. It's all there. But in Acts 16, Paul was on his second missionary trip with a stop in Philippi, Macedonia. So he encountered a group of women that were outside of the gates that seemed to be in like a worship session
Mm.
outside the gates. And so they approach them, and one of these women is Lydia, who she actually sells purple cloths. She's a cloth dealer.
Mm.
And she was really well off because the ingredients to make purple cloth were really expensive. So she
Mhm.
was able to sell them for a lot. And she even owned her own house, which was not something that was normal back then for women to own their own houses.
Yeah, she's off to a really strong start,
Yeah.
right? And so, uh, Paul and Silas come around and they're preaching and they have this, and she just like her heart is so open to God already,
Yeah.
which is a really important thing to note. Just how open she
Like her
is.
faith was
Her
so big.
Yes, and yes, absolutely. And this is not a Jewish woman, right? This
Mhm.
is a Gentile.
Yeah.
Right. So this is like that's what, after Jesus's death and resurrection, they start taking the good news of Jesus like everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? Like this isn't just for the Jews anymore. This is for all the people. So that's what they called people back then, were like Gentiles, people
Mhm.
that weren't Jews, right?
Yeah.
And so she just like clings to Paul's words,
Yeah.
right? And she allows him to baptize her, which is again another really huge deal
Yeah.
for a woman. And then after all of this is over, she invites him and his disciples back to her house.
Yeah. So that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And shows she has the space for them, and
Well,
and cares for them.
because her family is living with her too.
Yeah.
So it's like she has room. There are four men traveling, right? It's Paul, Silas, Timothy, and Luke. Luke is the author of the book of Acts, and Timothy is like a young scholar with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Paul and the disciples, Silas, they're all on their way to this worship center again outside the gates. And they come across a fortune teller.
Hmm.
And this was going on for a couple days. She was like following them around, like running her mouth. And Paul just got sick of it. And he's like, you know what? In the name of Jesus, I command you to flee from her. And I'm paraphrasing. Go read the
But that's
actual
really, I
chapter, but
mean,
that is
I
what happened.
appreciate that.
So, they commanded this evil spirit out of this slave girl. And she was a fortune teller, so she was able to make money.
Hmm.
And so her owners became enraged because she is no longer able to do fortune telling. So she can no longer make money for them.
Right.
So they get really angry, and they like drag Paul and Silas to the magistrates, and they're like, hey, like they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing, that are not custom for here.
Hmm.
And they allowed them to beat Paul and Silas and then throw them in jail. And it wasn't just being imprisoned, right? They were like taken to the utmost security
Yeah.
with shackles and everything.
Yeah. It was awful. Right. This is awful. Right. So instead of having a victim mentality, like we just talked about,
Yeah.
right? Because no one would blame them if they
Right.
did.
Yeah.
They are in jail singing and worshiping. I mean, they're just praising God,
Yeah.
because you can praise him anywhere
Hmm.
in your beautiful seasons and in your suffering seasons. He is with you, you know. There's that line in one of the songs, like my weapon is a melody. Like
Mm. Yep.
worship has power.
Yeah.
And we see that because all of a sudden an earthquake happens, and it frees all the prisoners from their chains, and the doors opened. This is no small thing for God.
No.
Like, whatever you are facing,
Mm.
it is it is a or I should say it's a small thing. It's not a big thing. It's a small thing. He can do it.
Yeah.
You know? And so the jailer was terrified. Absolutely terrified because it's like he's the one in charge of all of this and everyone's gone.
Yeah.
And he's probably going to be beaten and killed as a
Right.
result of this, right?
Yeah.
Um, but Paul and Silas helped bring him and his family to know Jesus. Instead of just like running for their lives,
Yep.
which they totally could have,
Hmm.
again, totally justified, they stay back because
Yeah.
they see the fear of this man and they have compassion on him.
Hmm.
They're acting just like Jesus. 100%.
So after they got out of jail, they were asked to leave the city, and because they're disturbing it. And so before they do, they decide to stop at Lydia's house again and spend a couple days with her.
Right. Right. Because why not? Yeah.
Right.
So she believed in God before Paul and Silas came around,
Mm.
which really, really showed her faith.
Yeah.
Um, and she was surrounded. She was in this area, obviously, because you know Paul and Silas are being thrown in jail. So it's obvious that these are other people that don't care to know God,
Right.
don't care about Jesus.
Yeah.
They are kind of surrounding themselves and believing in other gods and spirits.
Yeah.
I mean, it's these evil forces. That is the path that all these other people are taking.
Yeah.
And since she believed in God, like she was able to hear the words of Paul and understand them and
Yeah.
like know what they meant. And so God like laid this foundation in her heart to receive it when it came to her.
Yeah.
Again, just like that faithfulness in pursuing him so that when it came to her, it was just, she was so open to it,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. So since Paul and Silas were asked to leave the city, Lydia could have gotten in trouble for keeping them,
Hmm.
and I think it's so important to notice that her faith was bigger than her fear. And that's something that we can relate to right now. I mean, we have
Hmm.
so many fears thrown at us in different ways. So how has your faith been bigger than fear?
Yeah. So we talked about this a little bit in a previous episode. It was in a different series. I don't think it was in the Fruit of the Spirit series. But we talked about our women's conference that we did
Yeah.
back in the spring, and this was the first time that I was really publicly sharing God's faithfulness,
Mm.
but very real, hard realities of how my life has gone
Yeah.
over the last few years. And, I just remember so clearly, like when Mackenzie came to me and just said, "Hey, I'm really feeling led to do this. God's waking me up in my sleep and I like can't go back to sleep. And I'm just sitting here thinking about all these ideas and I'm praying over it. And I just know this is what we're supposed to do." There was no hesitation.
Yeah.
Absolutely none. But there was, the closer we got to it, and especially the night before, there was a lot of fear. And not really fear over telling it, because I had been pretty vulnerable about the situation. I mean, honoring privacy for certain things, but vulnerable and honest in the
Yeah.
same sense. And so that part really didn't scare me. It was just like, I'm actually like speaking about this and
Right.
I'm speaking about more of the like tender parts of it
Mhm.
and some of these private parts of it, like just for me
Right.
and my walk with God in all of this and how this is all panned out,
Yeah.
sharing that for the first time really
Yeah.
and sharing it to complete strangers,
Yep.
80 plus women sitting in here. And oh my gosh. And like, does this matter? Does it does
Yeah.
it matter? Like, and I know it does.
Mhm.
You know it does, but that's your fear starting to just wanting to trick you. And so, but I've never felt like higher on life after. I mean, it was
For sure.
such a high moment.
Yeah.
And even though you were talking about really hard things,
Mhm.
it was just like God met me there.
Yeah.
And that was really special.
Mhm.
That was really, really special. And like we said in our episode before, where we talked about a future women's conference, we're still working out the kinks as of right now, but mark your calendars for the first weekend in October. More details to come,
Yep.
but get
Next
excited.
next women's conference, you're
Yes,
not going to want to
we're
miss
ready.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're local to, it'll be in Grove City, PA. We know that.
Yes.
So first weekend in October, mark it on
Mhm.
your calendars. You're not going to want to miss it.
So exciting.
And similarly to what Denise just said, at that conference, I shared my personal story, my personal testimony
Mhm.
from childhood to now. So there was a lot combined in that.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of like skeletons per se that I have, and that Satan does not have a hold on me anymore.
Amen. Amen.
And if you're thinking about your life and like having this faithfulness and stepping out in fear and choosing faith instead, like share your testimony with people because the enemy wants nothing more than to keep you silent and quiet and
Mm-hmm.
not share these
Mm-hmm.
things
Amen.
because my testimony shows the character of God perfectly.
Yeah.
And if I keep that to myself, then people aren't going to hear that. And I just think that it's so important to use our voices
Mm-hmm.
and use them for the glory of God because I would not be here if it were not for God. I would be dead in a ditch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 100% certain for that. So I want to encourage you to step out, even if it is in fear, have that faith over fear to share your testimony with people because it does matter. And if it's just one on one at first, that's how mine started,
Yeah.
one on one to a big conference.
Mm.
It doesn't matter how you share it, but when you're using your words, you're using your testimonies, God is going to be honored in that.
That's right.
And he's going to use it. He uses every single thing. And when we step out and we do these things, you can start seeing redemption from those
Mm-hmm.
instead of continuing that victim kind of mentality and things.
Mm-hmm.
um, you can be redeemed from it.
Amen.
So there is nothing from my past that I am afraid to talk about because of what someone might think about me because of where God has brought me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a power that will never be taken from me.
Yeah.
And you can have that too. So I just want to encourage you, share your testimonies. It's so important to do right now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So as we close out um, this little session, we'll continue our conversation over in our Facebook community page. So make sure you're a part of that. And if you find yourself be feeling more fear than faith, or if you find yourself stuck in how to share your testimony or anything, Denise and I are both certified life coaches. So reach out to us and we would be happy to come alongside you
Yeah.
and serve you in any way that you need.
Absolutely.
But for our discussion questions, we want to do two this week. The first is to just reflect on your life and see where God's faithfulness has been woven throughout it. Because when you sit and reflect, you'll be able to see it.
Oh, it's everywhere.
And that's just so encouraging to look back and see where God has been in your life and know moving forward, He's in it with you every step of the way too.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second question is, how has faith cast out fear for you?
Good.
So a lot of times we let fear win. So step out.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to be scared while doing something. Um, Denise and I were both shaking when we went up on stage.
Oh yeah.
And even after, like, I just ran outside because I couldn't control like what just happened, like the
It's huge.
freedom that I
Yeah.
felt from exposing everything.
Yeah.
So it's okay to be scared while doing something.
Mhm.
We actually have a rule in our house that if it's scary, you should do it.
Yeah. My therapist actually like said that to me once. She's
Yeah.
like, if it feels uncomfortable, like
Mhm.
that's when you lean in.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's like your brain is trying to protect you,
Yes. Yep.
right? But certain things, like unless you're in imminent danger, like
Right.
you
Right.
do need to lean into that
Yeah.
discomfort.
And
you know.
excitement and nerves come from the same place in your
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
So you can like just trick yourself with
You're like, oh, I'm so
certain
excited.
tools that you can move from nerves to excitement. And it's wild what our
Yeah.
bodies can do. But we could get that into
Oh,
that
that's
for
in
a session.
That's in a coaching
Yeah.
session. Well, and it's funny, just total side note, like, she's saying she went off stage like after, like she went outside right after hers. And my speaking was right after lunch.
Mhm.
So I like barely ate. And if
Yeah.
you know me, I like I need a good meal. Like
Yes.
I need to eat, but I just couldn't. Like
Yeah.
I ate a couple, but I like had a plate for myself after,
Yeah.
but I was no. So that's very real.
Yeah.
Like it's okay
Yeah.
if you're nervous
Mhm.
about something, but like lean into that.
Yeah.
Totally lean into it. I mean, take it from us. Like we could have run for the hills.
Right. There were
Uh,
moments we may have wanted to.
yes, 100%. But God didn't let
Nope.
us.
No, and we wanted to show our faithfulness to God in this also of by doing this.
Yeah.
And what has come from that has been really encouraging. I mean,
Yeah.
this podcast is here
Mhm.
because of that.
Yeah, it is.
So,
It's really cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll continue all of this over in our Facebook community page. Make sure you're a part of that.
Yes.
And if you are feeling run down,
There's space for you at our table.